Yes, yes, you are
Yeah.
audible.
Yes, sir, you are audible.
So we are in the eighth day of our course, Renaissance and the New Epistemology. And today we are going to deliberate upon the topic Renaissance and geography. As a student of literature, we have always felt that geography and an understanding of geography and a sensitivity towards geographical aspects is always very important for the literature students because geography is not simply the name of air, water, and soil. It is basically the whole lifestyle. It is about resources. It is about human resources. It is about what you can say, the culture, the soil, the weather, the climate conditions, everything, and certainly even the food habits, even the population graph of a region, etc. So certainly all these aspects play a very important role in literature and understanding of literature. So we as students of literature have always felt a need that we should develop and we should inculcate within ourselves a sensitivity and an understanding of geography. When we talk about Renaissance with reference to geography, certainly it was a very unique time. It was a very peculiar time. I mean, Renaissance was a very unique and peculiar time with reference to geography also. We find Ptolemy's medieval world cracking, and we find the world of new geographers coming in. The new geographers, whether they were from the European continent or the new geographers come from the Islamic world. So, to deliberate upon this very crucial and very important issue, we have us here the chairman, Department of Geography, Aligarh Muslim University, Aligarh, Professor Dr. Syed Moshad Ahmed Saab. Uh, he is, as I said, a professor of geography and also the chairman in the Department of Geography, Aligarh Muslim University, Aligarh. He is a great achiever. When I say great achiever, you can think about that. When I joined Aligarh in 1988, he was among those very few people of AMU doing research at that time and even teaching juniors like us. And he was a sort of role model for us because, as I said, he was among those few people in the university those days who have qualified for JRF. So, a great achiever in himself, a great teacher also. He specializes in the field of environmental geography, physical geography, regional development, uh, planning, food security, natural hazards, and livelihood. He has successfully completed two major research projects sanctioned by the UGC and also by the Indian Council for Social Science Research, which is popularly called as ICSSR New Delhi. To his credit, there are five books, of which one is an authored book and four are edited books. A number of PhD theses and MPhil theses have been written under his supervision. 35 research papers he has got published in different peer-reviewed international and national journals, and he has attended 50 different international and national seminars and conferences. He has also been a subject expert of various national level and and state level competitive examinations. Also, the subject expert of different selection boards and interview boards of different universities made for the selection of university teachers. So, we, on behalf of our department, on behalf of our college, the management of our college, extend, and of course, on behalf of all our participants, extend a very warm welcome to our reverend guest speaker. Sir, thank you very much that you have got this time for us, in spite of all those disturbances that are going on in the university campus because of COVID-19. So we are even full of gratitude for that also. Sir, now the session is all yours. Please, sir.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yahya. Thank you for these kind words, though I don't deserve such type of appreciation. Uh, you know that today's topic is of very pertinent topic. It is very interest because you know that during the Renaissance period, geography reached to its zenith, and a lot of development took place in various branches of the knowledge, especially the science, the culture, the art, architectures, and geography was also one of the subjects because during that period, the Renaissance gave impetus to broaden the horizon of the world. And there was change in the world map, some new continents and the lands were added in the map, because earlier there was a old world comprising the Asia, Europe, and Africa. So after the age of discovery and the explorations, so this new world was added. So a lot of development took place in the field of geography. So you have chosen a very pertinent topic for this lecture series, Renaissance Geography. As we know that this topic has two components, Renaissance and geography. As earlier told by Dr. Yahya about the geography. So you know that geography is a very scientific branch of knowledge. It is not only confined to the earth descriptions, dealing with the surface feature of river, mountains, natural vegetation, soil, rocks, minerals. It also incorporates the interrelationship between man and environment. That what are the influence of man on the environment and how environmental factors are influencing the man. So it is the study of the interrelationship between man and environment. And you know that in different phases of the time, there has been change in the definitions of geography, and it is now told that it is the study of spatial variations. We can study any phenomena on the surface of Earth when we study its distribution and find variations. Because you know that any phenomena on the Earth's surface, whether it is a climatic condition, natural vegetation, soil, human races, distribution of population, we found variations on that surface. So we geographers try to explain it, why it is so. So various definitions of geography is there. There's no need of further elaboration. And the first part is the Renaissance. You know that Renaissance is a renewal of the classical or ancient text for the further development of the knowledge. So what happened that during the Renaissance, all of a sudden, there was increase in the interest of the European people to study about the classical text. And after going through these texts, they were in a position to critically examine it and do further research. So in this way, Renaissance give impetus for the future research. And you know that it developed the scientific temper among those people. So as far as you know that the sorry for interruption. As far as the learning outcomes of this topic is concerned, you know that some few points are there. So first of all, the first point is to know about the concept of the Renaissance. Okay, what is the concept of Renaissance? As I already stated, that Renaissance is a period in the European history which began in 14th century and lasted till 17th century AD. And this is a transitional period between the modern period and the medieval period. So in other words, we can say that this is the period of it was the start of the modern periods. So during this period, a lot of development took place, in various branches of the knowledge, and it was mainly because of the people's interest in classical and old text of the Romans and the Greeks. So we would study in the first. Then the second point to be discussed, that is to explain how Renaissance broadened the horizon of world through discovery and explorations. You know that in this period, though as far as the discovery and exploration is concerned, it has taken place in different periods, in classical periods, in the Arab periods. But during this period, there was sudden increase in the explorations and discovery of the different sea routes and different lands, continents. So a lot of development took place in the explorations and discovery. Various voyages were set out to the different corner of the world by the Europeans. So the next point is to understand how cartographic development took place during this period. You know that cartography is the art and science of the map making. When the voyagers, they went to the different part of the world, at that time navigation tools were not very much developed. So what happened? They were taking help of the Potolone charts or the simple maps which were prepared by the Romans and the Greeks. Especially they took help of the map of the Ptolemy. He was a very versatile scholar of the ancient periods. But that map was not perfect. When they started their journey, they encountered in determining the longitudes, latitudes, the right directions. So these were the problems. So that is why they did a lot of development in order to encounter these problems of navigations. So this was also one of the development of cartography during that period of the Renaissance. Then we will discuss about new inventions and new inventions of various tools and implements which were helpful in navigations and observations of various celestials and terrestrial bodies. Then the next point would be to explain how Renaissance played a vital role in removing some of the geographical myths and erroneous concepts. You know that up to the 14th century AD, there were so many myths regarding geographical knowledge. And these myths were, to a larger extent, were removed. For example, one of the myths was that the Indian Ocean is an enclosed sea. It was written by the Ptolemy in his Geographia or Geography. So when the expedition of different voyages took place, they found that Indian Ocean is not enclosed. And up to the 70-degree latitudes, there is open ocean. And south of that, there is a Antarctic Ocean. So many myths, geographical myths or misconceptions were there. So those myths and conceptions were removed. Why? Because the scholar of these periods, their study was based on the observation. And those observations were based on the scientific evidences. So various these myths were removed during these periods. And also, you know, there were some scholars, outstanding scholars in this period. For example, Kant, he was a very great scholar of that age. Varenius, Humboldt, Ritters, who did a lot of contribution in the field of geography during these periods. So these are the important points to be discussed, and we would discuss these points in this lecture. So let us start with the concept of the Renaissance. As I earlier pointed out, that it was a period of history in Europe, which began in the 14th century and continued to 17th century AD, and it was the start of modern age. So Renaissance is a French word which means rebirth. What is the meaning of this rebirth? Revival. Revival of what? Revival of the interest of the people in the old text, because throughout the Dark Age, which spanned from the 6th century AD to 13th century AD, because of the political turmoil and the downfall of the Roman Empire, famine, and the pandemic. So no academic development took place in the Europe. But after that, when the congenial environment prevailed during these periods, the scholars, they tried to go through those texts, and they had a very critical examination of those texts, because they didn't follow blindly what is written in those texts that should be followed. There was critical examinations, and these critical examinations of those texts give birth to the new research and innovations in different fields. So that is why this age is Renaissance period is very important. This period produced a new intellect, scientific, and artistic attitude among Europeans. During this period, the spirit of questioning the tradition had an important place. You know that what tradition, the academic tradition was prevailing, the people didn't accept it blindly. Rather, they question it, question it and verified it, which is the principle of the science, that is positivism. That if anything is there, so question it, verify the fact, and if it is proof, then you accept it. So this type of science developed during the Renaissance. During Renaissance, what happened that discoveries and explorations take place, and the root cause of the discoveries and exploration was that Europeans, they started to find out the new routes for the trade, because earlier the trade was through the old Silk route, which was passing through the Mediterranean to the Middle East, through the Middle East and the Central Asia to the eastern part of the China. And through these routes, especially the Asian goods, especially the silk, the spices, gold, silver, pearls, rubies, these items which were of great demand, they were imported. But through these routes, what happened that the goods had to change various hands, and because of that, the margin of profit was very less. So the European thought that why not we explore the new routes, which is through the oceans, and in this way the profit of margin would increase. So that is why they tried to explore the new route. Also, one of the reasons that the Constantinia, that came under the power of the rule of the Turks, and these Turks, they were levying the heavy tax on the imported items. So they were compelled to explore the new routes, and earlier the trades were confined to the coastal areas of the Mediterranean Sea in order to bring the cargo. So after that, they tried to go out of that Mediterranean Sea through Gibraltar, And also one of the main factor during this time was that the Arabs, they became very weak and they were defeated by the Europeans. So through the route of Gibraltar's, now the passage was clear. They can easily go to the Atlantic Sea, and through the Atlantic Sea to the different part of the oceans, especially the East Asia through the west. So these were the story of the discovery and exploration, how it started. But you know that during the course of the explorations and discovery, these sailors or navigators, they felt a lot of difficulties, and because of that, different inventions and discoveries they did. You know that during this period, I'll say I already pointed out to you that there were some erroneous concepts and the myths, and one of the very erroneous concept was given by the Ptolemy, and that concept was the geocentric concept. What is geocentric concept? That Earth is located in the center of the universe, and all the planets and the suns, they revolve around it. So this concept prevailed up to the 15th century AD. But after that, there was a scholar known as Copernicus. So Copernicus, he proved that this concept is wrong. It is a wrong notion given by the Ptolemy, and the geocentric concept of the universe was replaced by the heliocentric concept. And according to this heliocentric concept, it is the sun which occupies position in the central part of the universe, and all the planets, they revolve around the sun. So according to him, there were 7 planets, and those planets, they were revolving in a circle, in circular path, which is not true. It was rectified by the other scholar, that is Kepler. Kepler pointed out that the path of the revolution of this the Earth or other planet, it is not circular, rather it is a elliptical. So in this way, we find that the motions, the planetary motions, they were found out that the Earth has two types of motion, that is the rotations and revolution, and Earth is tilted on its axis. So this was the development of this age, and you know that because of that, the occurrence of the day and night, the occurrence of the seasonal changes. So because of these motions, these phenomena were explained, and the planetary motion given by the Kepler and the Copernicus, they helped a lot in solving so many geographical problems related to the seasonal change of the Earth and the phenomena of the day and night. So these were the development. After that, you know that there was another the scholar. The name of that scholar was Galileo. You know, the Galileos play a vital role in scientific inventions, especially, you know, he developed the magnifying power of the telescope, and he magnified the power of telescope 30 times. So earlier, the observation of the terrestrial bodies were limited by these telescope. But after that, the telescope was move towards the heavenly bodies, the position of the sun, the moon, the planets, and the earth. So this telescope that helped a lot in the observation of these celestial bodies. He is also credited to discover 4 planets of the, or the moons of the Jupiter, the roughness of the moon. You know that nowadays there is exploration by the NASA, and satellites are there, and they are telling you that there are craters at the moon. But you know, during the time of Renaissance, this Galileo, he pointed out that the surface of moon is not even, rather it is rough, it is uneven, and it has topographical features just like the surface of the earth. Mountains are there, plains are there, plateaus are there. Then he also gave a concept of the sunspot activities, sunspots. You know, he observed sunspots, spots on the sun. And you know that when the sunspot activities take place, which this is a phenomena which happens after a specific period of time, say for example 11 years or 33 years, I don't remember exact the periods, but when the sunspot activities take place, all of a sudden temperature increases. So this is also one of the reason of the climatic change. Then in 1686, Isaac Newton presented his law of gravitation, and this law of gravitation that revolutionized various concepts in geography. For example, you know that as far as the occurrence of the tide is concerned, it is explained by the gravitational forces of the sun, moon on the earth. When they come in a straight line, they exert gravitational pull or the power of gravity on the surface of the water. As a result, the water is pulled up. So there is a high tide, and at the other side there is low tide. So this law of gravitations that helped a lot of further research and discovery. You know, there was a scholar known as Kant. He was a great philosopher, and he tried to explain the origin of Earth. So he propounded the first theory of the origin of Earth, that was gaseous hypothesis of the origin of Earth, and this hypothesis was based on this law of gravitations. So this discovery of the Newton's, that is the law of gravitations, that revolutionized various geographical concepts, and this development led to the scientific revolutions and a period of specialization, which give birth to branching the physical, biological, and social sciences. You know that earlier there were no compartmentalization of the knowledge. The knowledge was, you know, any scholar, he is supposed to be versatile. He had knowledge of history, geography, science, physics, chemistry. There was no specializations. But in this period, you know, a specialization of the knowledge, compartmentalizations of the knowledge take place after the Newton's discovery of the law of gravitations. So branching of the knowledge, the specialization of the knowledge, the physical sciences, the biological sciences, and the social sciences that took place. Now, you know, there is a misplacing of the slides, and this is also important segment of the Renaissance, important discoveries and exploration during the Renaissance. So what happened, that I pointed out that various explorers, they went out in the different part of the world during these periods. So one of the great scholar of this period was Prince Henry the Navigator. Actually, he was a king, or you can prince of Portugal, and he was a geographer, and he established an Institute of Geography in which he invited at Sagres, and he invited the scholars belonging to the different disciplines, especially the geographer, the astronomer, the cartographer, in order to train the navigators or mariners in the field of navigations, and to find out the new trade routes and prepare the maps which be helpful for the navigations. So he himself went to the explorations, and you know that he went to the island of Canary, which is located to the northwestern coast of the Africa, and the island of Azores and Madeira. So for the first time, he went to the voyage of northern part of the Atlantic Oceans, and he discovered these three group of islands, the Canary Islands. You know that one very important current is the Canary Current, okay, ocean currents on the name of these islands. Then the island of Azores and Madeira, all these islands, they are in the northern part, a bit south from the Italy and the Portugals in the Atlantic Oceans. Then another scholar was there, Gil Ains. He was also Portuguese. He belongs to Portugal, and he discovered the Cape Bojada, Eloga, the Port Elizabeth, which is in the southern coast of the Africa. So when Gil Ains went to the exploration, he reached Cape Bojada, which is south of the three previous group of the islands, which were discovered by the Prince Henry. And you know that earlier there was a Bojada puzzle. There was a wrong notion, misconception among the scholar that anyone who goes south of Bojada, Cape Bojada, he would face so many difficulties. And you know that the air currents are very strong there, and they develop eddies, they develop circular motion, and as a result of which the water forms the foams, and the temperature of water is so much that anyone who goes south of Bojadas, he will be black. So when the Gil Ains went south of Bojadas, he didn't find anything, and the color of no one became black. So in this way, the Bojada puzzle was solved. Then there was another scholar or the navigator, Bartholomew Dias. He was also Portuguese, and he went to the Cape Agalhas and Cape of the Good Hope. You know that traveling through the Atlantic Ocean along the coast of the Western Africa, he reached to the Port of Elizabeth and the Cape Eloga. The Agalhas. Then the very important explorer of that period was Christopher Columbus. He was Italian, and he went on voyage into the patronage of the King of Spain, the Queen Elizabeth I, and the King. The Queen Isabella I and the King Elizabeth II. He sent him on the voyage, and you know that in this period, you know that all of a sudden, I told you that all of a sudden the activities of explorations and invention increased all of a sudden. Because most of the explorations that was pre-planned, and that was financed by the the trading companies of those countries and the kings or the rulers of those countries, because it was motivated by certain factors. The first motive was that when these explorers will reach there, they establish their colony, and they would extract the resources from there. So economic reason was the main reasons. Then the second factor was there, that we would import the resources and establish the trade relations. So that is why the Christopher, you know, that Christopher, he was firm believer of the round shape of the earth. He believed that the shape of earth is round, and he wanted to go to the eastern part of the Asia for trade of the spices. So he thought that if we move towards the west, we can easily reach to the east. Why? Because the earth is round, and if we start from the west, ultimately we would reach to the east. So he went out, and he reached to the Caribbean seaboard, the East Indies, you know. And first of all, he reached to the island of San Salvador, then the Cuba, then Haiti in the first phase. So in 1492, he reached to the Caribbean seaboard, and he explored the San Salvador, which is at present the capital of the El Salvador, and then the Cuba, and then Haiti. In the second journey, he reached to the Dominica, you know, the Dominica. It is a Dominican Republic in the Caribbean areas. Then the island of Mary Glante, then Montserrat, Antigua, Santa Cruz, Puerto Rico, Virgin Islands. So these are the group of islands. Mostly they are located in the Caribbean seaboard. And in his three journey or voyages, he discovered all these islands, and he thought that I have reached to the East Indies, and that is why he named it the West Indies. Okay, but actually he didn't reach to the East Indies. Why? Because it was the western part of the North America. Okay. Then after that, another scholar was there, Vasupese Amerigo. He reached to the interior part of the North America, and after his name, this continent, the North America and South America, were named the America. So in this way, the American, the new world of America were discovered. Then Vasco da Gama, he was Portuguese, and he wanted to go to the India for the trade of spice. So through the Atlantic Ocean, along the western coast of the Africa, he first of all reached to the Braided Bay, which is also known as St. Helena. Then he went to Mozambique through the Cape of the Good Hope, and in Mozambique he met with the 4 Arab traders, and those Arab traders, they told him about the India, especially the western coast of the India. Those Arab traders guided him, and as a result of which he reached to the Calicut, the western coast of India, and he established the Portuguese colony there, because you know that till recently, especially some part of the Goa was Portuguese colony, and there is a station. If you have gone to the Goa, there is a station Vasco da Gama. So One another explorer of that period was Ferdinand Magellan. He was Spanish, and he went to the coast of Brazil, and from the coast of Brazil, he searched. Actually, he was the first European explorer who went to the eastern part of the Asia through the west. The Christopher Columbus, though he tried but didn't reach, didn't find passage towards the east, but he find out the passage through the Magellan Strait, which is in the southern part of the South America. So through the Magellan Strait, he reached to the island of Guam, and then the Philippines, and then famous spice island of Malacca, which is in between the Philippines and the Japan. So in this way, he reached to the famous spice land, and he traveled from west and reached to the east. Then another scholar was there, Captain James Cook, who was British, and he explored the major part of the Indian Ocean, and he removed the myth of the enclosed sea of the Indian Ocean, because Ptolemy pointed out in his Geographia that Indian Ocean is enclosed sea. But he sailed his ship south of 71-degree latitudes, and he found that up to that latitude there is the ocean, and south of that there is some landmass. Maybe the Antarctic Ocean, and in the other side the New Zealand, the eastern coast of the Australia. So in this way, he encircled the New Zealand coast and reached to the eastern portion of the Australia, but he couldn't go further northward to the Australia, because he was facing the problem of Great Barrier Reef, because along the eastern side of the Australia there is a Great Barrier Reef, which is a coral reef, and whenever the ships goes that side, there is a possibility of the collision of those ships with the Great Barrier Reefs. After that, he encircled the major part of the Atlantic Ocean, went to the Georgia, Solomon Islands, Caledonia, Loyalty Islands, and North Pacific. So in this way, we find that during this age, different corners of unknown world, terra incognita, the unknown worlds, they were explored, their maps were prepared, and they were added in the map of the old world, because earlier the world was confined to the Asia, Europe, and the northern part of the Africa. Then after that, the new world, the North America and the South America, that was added on the world map, and then the continent of the Australia, and then the New Zealand and Antarctica. So we can say that addition of these new lands and continents was the outcome of the discovery and exploration of the navigators or mariners of these periods. So these are the trade routes of different the mariners, and development of cartography. As a result of the explorations and discovery, when the explorers or voyagers went out, they faced difficulties in locating different places which were mentioned on the map. So as a result, they developed the art and science of the map making, which is known as cartography. But you know that as far as the art of map making or the cartography is concerned, there are certain basic principles. So you might have seen the map, and on the background of the map, there are certain network of longitudes and latitudes. So these longitudes and latitudes, they help in the location of different places on the Earth's surface, that what are their exact locations. Suppose if you have to give the locations of Aligarh, we would say that Aligarh is located between this latitude and that latitude, and this longitude and that latitude. So any place comes under any coordinates, and with the reference of the longitudes and latitudes, the locations of any place is determined. So the development of the graticules or the network of longitudes and latitudes is very essential for the map. If this network is not there, which is called as the map projections. So map projection is very, very essential for the map. If map projection is not there, if the lines of longitudes and latitudes are not there on the map, it is not map, it is a sketch. Then the another important thing is the scale, because any map without a scale is not a map. Why? Because on map, you know that the location of distance between 2 points, that is proportionate to the scale. It is in accordance with the actual distance of the place, and that distance is transferred proportionate to that scale on the map. So for making any map, we need scale, we need map projections. So what happened that before this age of Renaissance, most of the maps, they were crude and rudimentary, though they were showing the map projections, but those map projections were not in accordance with the location of a particular area. And that is why they were not showing the exact location, the exact longitudes and latitudes. There were some errors. So that is why the art of map making or the science of cartography was very much developed in these periods. So it was the fact that most of the voyages relied on the Ptolemy's calculations of longitudes and circumferences of the Earth, but during the voyages, they found that Ptolemy's calculation was erroneous. You know that Ptolemy measured the circumference of the Earth, and he pointed out that the distance between the two longitudes is about 60 miles, which was not correct. So whenever the travelers followed the distance between two longitudes as calculated by the Ptolemies, they didn't reach to the desired destinations or desired directions. So this was the problems, because they wholly rely on the Ptolemy's calculations of the longitudes and the latitudes. So as a result, a lot of improvement took place in this field. And you know that in 1507, the first world map was prepared by Martin Welsmuller, showing the America as a separate continent. Earlier this, before 1507, no map was there showing the continents of the New World, North America and South America. So after the preparations of this map, we were in a position to observe or see these two continents, North America and the South America. This map was based on the discovery of new land by Columbus and John Corbett, voyage to the North America. This map was called Carto Marins. However, this world map was not very useful because it was drawn on the principle of Ortolano chart. You know that as far as the drawing of this map was concerned, it was not drawn on the basis of the longitudes and latitude. There were no longitudes and latitude. It was drawn on the basis of Portolano chart. And actually, you know that there was a sheet of paper, and on this sheet of paper, some centers were there, and from those centers, different lines were radiating in different direction. And those lines, they were different rays were radiating in different direction, and they were pointing out the location of a particular place. So especially the location of the port and the harbors were ascertained with the help of these Potolano charts. But when the voyagers followed the straight line, didn't reach to their desired destination. So this Potolano charts, and on the basis of this Potolano charts, the Martin Muller's world map, first world map, was prepared. So it was also suffering from certain flaws and demerits. So after that, in order to overcome the shortcomings of earlier maps for navigations, Peter Aspian prepared a heart-shaped map in 1530, but on this map also distance and directions were distorted. Again, the attempts were made to rectify the errors in the map, and another map was prepared by the Peter Aspian in 1530, but also some distortions in the shape and size of the map was there. Now question arises that why this type of problem is there. It is mainly because of the fact that, we show the entire Earth or some portion of Earth on the map, and the Earth is a spherical. It is not flat. So when we transfer this spherical information to the flat or a plain paper, certain distortions take place, and those distortions are either in the shape and the size. Suppose if you take a orange, the shape of orange is resembling to that of the Earth, and if you peel off it, so what would happen? The outer covering of it, if you flat it, there would be some gap in between. So that is a sort of distortion. Similarly, if we are transferring the spherical surface on the plane surface, some distortions take place, and that distortion is of either shape or size of any part of the land. So the cartographer, they tried their level best to solve these problems, but what happens that we cannot preserve both the characteristics of the shape and size. If we preserve the shape, then there is distortion in the size, and if we preserve the size, then there is distortion in the shape. So various type of the map projections, they were devised, and after that, there was a cartographer, and his name was Gradus Mercatus, who designed an improved form of map projection, which is most suitable for the navigations in the mid latitude and the lower latitudes. So this was an improved shape of the map projection or the map, and the map which were prepared on the basis of this projection, it was improved, and it tried to minimize the errors. So the Mercator projections was developed. So in this way, we find that a lot of developments took place in the field of cartography. Different type of maps were prepared showing different part of the world which were discovered on the map of the world, and different type of map projections were invented or designed, keeping in view the different purpose. For example, the Mercator projection was most suited for the navigation purpose, and with the help of these projections, when the further navigations took place of the different parts, the navigators were able to reach to the desired place, desired directions, and desired longitude and latitudes. So these were the cartographic developments. Then certain instruments were also invented during this period, and these were helpful in determining the longitude, latitude, the direction, and the time of different places. So these instruments were as follow. one of the important instrument was cross staff. You know, this cross staff instrument was very useful in measuring the angle between the horizon and the altitude of any celestial bodies. So with this measurement, when a navigator is in the positions to determine the angle, he will easily find out the location where he is. So this instrument was very helpful in finding out the latitude of any place. Then another instrument was the sextant. We use this instrument sextant, especially in the surveying. So it is not only helping in determining the horizontal or the horizontal angles between two objects. It is also helpful in measuring the angles between the horizon and the celestial bodies of the star or the sun or the moon, and which helps in locating the latitude of any place. Then telescope. The first telescope was made in the Netherlands by Hans Lippershey and Zacharias Janssen. But this instrument was improved over different period of time by different scientists, and Galileo is credited to enhance its power, magnifying power 30 times. And because of that, the observation of celestial bodies, this star, the sun and moon, was made possible. In pendulum clock, you know that at that time, when the voyages were in the sea, in the different part, in the journey of the different part of the world, and they were not in the positions to determine the exact time, especially in the night or in the day. They were calculating it by the shadow of the sun or the moon, but they were in the positions to dividing the days and the night into different parts. There is no exact measurement of the day and night into the hours. So after the inventions of the pendulum clock, it became easy to calculate the time, which is very helpful in the navigations. So this is the picture of the first pendulum clock. Then printing press. This printing press was one of the greatest achievement or the inventions of during the period of Renaissance, and it was invented by Johannes Gutenberg of Germany. So the inventions of printing press started the printing revolutions, and with the help of this printing press, you know that the works of most of the scholars of that period, it started being published in the form of books or the journals or different newspapers came out. So it was one of the agent of the change, because the spirit of education, the spirit of the new ideas, innovations, the new thought, that spread to the different corner of the world. And when the peoples went through this, and they made it, they impressed it, and sometimes they made its critical appraisals also. So in this way, further advancement of the knowledge took place. Then the development of modern geography. You know that during this period, some scholars were there, and those scholars, they played a vital role in the advancement of the geographical knowledge. So one of the scholar was Verenius. His period was 1622 to 1650, and he's known as Bernard Verenius, who was born in 1622 in the village near Hamburg in Germany. He made two scientific contributions to the development of geography. Firstly, he brought together the contemporary knowledge of astronomy and cartography for the critical evaluations of different theories of his time. So with the help of astronomy, astronomy is a branch of knowledge in which we study various celestial bodies, the star, the sun, the moon, the planets, their movement, their rotations, and the influence of the sun and moon on the climatic conditions of the earth. So he integrated the astronomy and the cartography for development of the other branches of the knowledge, or for the critical evaluations of the pre-existing knowledge with the help of these two branches of the knowledge. And his second contribution was he divided geography into the two parts. You know that he is known as the father of the dualism or dichotomy in geography. Earlier I pointed out that there were no specialization of the knowledge. The knowledge was combined, different branches of the knowledge of a discipline or a branch of science were clubbed together. But what happened that he divided the geography into two branches. One was the general geography and the another was a special geography. So what is the general geography? The general geography is that branch of geography which deals with the systematic knowledge of any knowledge, whether it is related to the climatic condition or the landform or the geomorphology. Okay, so when any topic or any aspect of geography is studied with the help of the general laws, theories in systematic way, it is called as general geography, because various branches are there. For example, there is a special branch of the knowledge in geography, that is climatology. So what we study in the climatology, we study different aspects of the attributes of weather and climate in systematic way, in detail, with the help of various theories. For example, we study the structure and composition of the atmosphere, the pressure system, the temperature, the prevailing winds, the local winds. Means a study of any particular topic in detail, in a systematic way. So that is general geography. And when we study a particular area, a particular region, and all the aspects of that particular region, for example, when we study the Chota Nagpur region, Chota Nagpur region is a small region of India. And when we study the rocks of Chota Nagpur, the minerals of Chota Nagpur region, the climatic conditions of Chota Nagpur region, the soil of Chota Nagpur region, means each and every aspect of the Chota Nagpur region, it becomes the special geography. So is it clear what is the general geography and the special geography? So he's credited to the division of geography into two branches, general geography and special geography. And in other words, it is also known as regional geography or systematic geography. So the regional geography is the special geography of a particular region or a place, and systematic geography is the general geography. The terms are different, the meaning is the same. He also further divided geography into three following parts. The absolute part, which deals with the shape, size of the earth, and the physical geography like geomorphology, climatology, and the oceanography. So he told that there is absolute part of the geography. What is absolute part? Absolute part deals with the astronomical knowledge, or we can say that it is a part of mathematical geography or astronomy. This is the one part, and the another part is the physical geography, dealing with geomorphology, the study of the landforms, the study of weather and climate, the study of the ocean, the ocean current, salinity, temperature. These are the different aspects. Then the another aspect is the comparative section. He also pointed out there is another section of the geography, that is comparative section, which deals with the location of different places in relations to each other, and the principle of which helps in the principle of the navigations. Means when we study the location, relative location of the different places, that how one place is different from the another place. For example, some places have insular location, some places has peninsular locations. Okay, so if any area is surrounded by the water from three sides, that is peninsular location. Insular locations, if any area is surrounded by land from all the side, then insular locations. So these are the different type of locations. So he's also credited to divide the geography in various way. So first way of dividing the geography was the systematic geography and the regional geography. Then another way of dividing the geography was absolute part of the geography, then relative or planetary part of the geography, and then the comparative section of the geography. Then there was another scholar, great scholar of this age, was Immanuel Kant. He was a philosopher, and he contributed a lot in the field of astronomy, geology, and geography. And he was born in the Königsberg in the East Prussia, Russia. So he is credited to propound the first theory of the origin of the Earth. And the name of his theory was gaseous hypothesis of the origin of the Earth. You know, when the various the researches took place in the field of the planetary motion and the various planets and the stars were discovered, then the question arises that how the solar system originated. So different hypotheses or the theories were propounded at different period of time. Various theories were there. So the first theory regarding the origin of the solar system was put forward or propounded by the Immanuel Kant, and the name of his theory was the gaseous hypothesis gaseous hypothesis of the origin of the Earth or the solar system. So according to this theory, you know that he pointed out that in the universe there was gaseous matter. There was primordial matter that was in the state of gas. It was gaseous, it was very cold, and it was motionless. So what happened that after some time, because of the forces of gravitation, because of the mutual gravitation among these primordial matters, what happened that they came in the motion. They started rotating, and because of that their temperature increased, and certain rings were ejected out from these primordial matters. And after that, these rings, after cooling and condensation, split into different parts, and then they become the planets. And the middle part of that remained as the sun. So this was the gaseous hypothesis, origin of the solar system or the Earth. But later on, this hypothesis was contradicted by other scholars. So if we go through that discussion, that will be longer on. So he is credited to propound the first hypothesis of the origin of solar system or the Earth in 1755. Then he was mainly interested in the physical geography. He was a physical geographer, but in physical geography, you know, later on the geography was divided into two parts. That is the physical geography and the human geography. So this physical geography deals with the natural part of the environment, that is landform, climate, soil, vegetations. These were the subject matter of the physical geography. So he was very much interested in the physical geography, but he also included certain other components in this geography, and that was the political geography, commercial geography, teleological geography, mathematical geography, and moral geography. But nowadays the system is not there, physical geography is a separate branch which includes the geomorphology, climatology, oceanography, hydrology. These are the part of the physical geography. But according to him, the physical geography also included the component of political, commercial, teleological, mathematical, and moral geography. He also considered man as one of the important agent of change on the surface of Earth, because though he studied the physical feature on the Earth, but he didn't exclude man, because man is an important agent of change on the surface of Earth. Man is one of the important component of the environment, and you know that nowadays, because of the activities of man, because man is always on the move, and man is doing a lot of developmental activities on the surface of Earth, and because of that, at one side there are developmental activities, development of industries, agriculture, space technology. Man has reached on the space, but at the same time, man has brought a lot of destructions and devastation and change. Climatic change, you can say, global warming. These are the changes brought about man on the surface of Earth. So according to him, he visualized the role of man at that time. Nowadays, the scientists, they are recognizing that all the global problems, environmental problems, they are anthropogenic, they are rooted in the destructive activities of mankind. Then he pointed that the physical geography deals with the natural features of the Earth's surface, ocean, land, mountains, rivers, atmosphere, man, animal, and plants. You know that he was the first geographer who provided an early statement of geography as chorology. You know, there is a question in the UPSC this year and in the UPPCS, that what is chorology? What do you mean by the chorology? So first of all, the term chorology was coined by this scholar, Kant, Immanuel Kant, and he pointed out that geography is a chorology. Means geography is a descriptive science. It is the study of description of Earth's surface, because if we go through the basic definition of geography, that geography is composed of two words, geo and graphy. Geo means earth and graphy means descriptions. So chorology is the earth description. So he gave the concept of the geography, that what is the geography and what are the subject matter of the geography. Then beside Kant's and Varenius, the most outstanding scholar of the last phase of this Renaissance were the Alexander von Humboldt and Karl Litter, who were considered to be the founder of the modern geographical thought. Humboldt declared geography as a descriptive science, while Litter credited to introduce man in the geographical studies. You know that Alexander von Humboldt did a lot of work and contributed a lot in the field of the geography, and he was a versatile genius, a versatile scholar, and his knowledge was not confined only to the geography. Rather, he was expert of the geology, geomorphology, climatology, botany, zoology, and even physics and chemistry. And he was great traveler also, and sharp observer, who traveled about 4,000 miles to the different parts of the world. You know that he was a systematic geographer. He contributed a lot in the field of especially the physical geography, that is the geomorphology. And he was the first scholar who coined the term the climatology, because climatology is a branch of knowledge. So first of all, another branch of the knowledge was introduced, and that was the climatology. And it was the one Humboldt, Alexander Humboldt, who coined this term. So besides, he was also a traveler, and he traveled different part of the South America, especially the Venezuela, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, and the Latin America, the Central America, and the some part of the Europe, like the Austria, the New Zealand, the Italy, so different parts. So wherever he went, you know that he didn't go. He was not merely observer, though he observed, but he tried to establish the relationship. Whatever he observed, he tried to do measurement of the different things. For example, when he climbed any mountains, he tried to measure the height of that mountain or the mountain peaks. When he climbed on the mountain, he tried to establish the altitude and the relation of altitude with the temperature and the pressure. So he went to his journey to the different of the part of the world along with his instrument, and those instruments were sextant for determining the longitude, latitudes of the place, then telescope. With the help of telescope, he was in positions to observe the objects of far off places. Then the chronometers, that was the instrument used for the measuring the blueness of the sky. Then thermometer, in order to measure the temperature, used for the measuring the temperature. Then the barometer for the pressure. So wherever he went, he measured the physical aspect, that is the temperature, pressure. He was the first scholar who established relation between the temperature and the pressure. And we know that wherever there is a high temperature, there is a low pressure, and where the pressure is temperature is high, pressure is low. So there is an inverse relationship. So he is credited to establish the relationship between the temperature and pressure. He also observed different type of rocks, describe their characteristics, and also explain that what are the impact of the rocks on the magnetic declination. You know that Earth is pointed towards the north. That is the geographical north. But when we see the true north, okay, there are two types of north: geographical north and true north. So the geographical north are always pointed northward, and the true north is slightly deviated from the true north, and it is mainly because of the magnetism of the rocks. So he tried to measure the magnetic field of the rocks, which became helpful in determining the magnetic declinations of Earth's axis. Then he studied the different type of plants in different type of the regions. You know, he studied the influence of altitude, temperature, and natural vegetations on the crops. He was the first to make an accurate measurement of the elevations of the Spanish meseta. Actually, meseta is a tabular land, a meseta, which is found in the Spans. So he was the first scholar to measure the height. He also climbed to the Chimborazo peak of the South America and measured its elevations. So he went to the different part. He established a positive relationship between the forest and the rainfall, and this idea is still persists. You know that when he went to his field trip to the major part of the South America, he found that the water of the Lake of Valencia, that is shrinking. So he tried to analyze it, and he found that in the catchment area of this lake, there has been deforestation. because the people have converted that forested area into the agriculture field. So he tried to correlate that deforestation has led to the shrinkage in the water of the Valencia Lake. So he pointed out that there is a relationship between the forest cover and the rainfall. If the forest area is more, there are more possibility of the occurrence of rainfall, especially the convectional type of rainfall. And if we clear the forest of particular area, so naturally the amount of rainy days would be less and the amount of rainfall could be less. And still this concept is persistent. So it was his research, and he gave that new concept. Then he went to the Venezuela. He explored Orinoco River and established the truth of its connection with Amazon River. You know that Amazon River is in South America. It has the largest river basins in North America. And he pointed out that Orinoco is the tributary of the Amazon, which ultimately fall there. He did a measurement and established exact latitude and longitude of many places. He collected plants and rock sample for the study and transported it to the Cuba. You know, whenever when he went to the travel to the different part of the world, along with him there was a botanist, and with the help of that botanist, you know, he also took the plant sample, and he was also a geologist, so he took the rock sample and carried those rock samples for the further study to the Cuba. He gave scientific explanation of influence of altitude, temperature, and vegetations. Higher we go, cooler we feel. As we go, as the height increases, temperature decreases, and pressure also decreases. So he pointed out that there is influence of altitude or height on human health. When we go higher and higher on a mountain, we feel dizziness, and it's mainly because of the lack of the oxygen there. He observed and recorded the cold Peru current for the first time. He also measured the temperature and velocity of this current. You know that there is a current along the northwestern coast of the South America, which is known as Peruvian currents, which is also called as the Humboldt currents. So first of all, this current was discovered by the Humboldt. So we can say that his area of scholarship was very varied, very wide and extensive, not only confined to the field of climatology or the geomorphology, but oceanography also. He was invited by the Russian Tsar to explore virgin lands of Siberia across the Ural mountain, where he made observation of the temperature and pressure, and he concluded that temperature on the same latitude varies moving inward from the coast. So he gave the concept of continentality. What is the concept of continentality? You know that as we move away from the ocean, continentality occurs. For example, in the coastal areas, the climatic conditions are the moderate because of oceanic influence. And if you come to the interior part, for example, the Aligarh, the Agra, and the Delhi, the extreme conditions prevail. So this is the concept of continentality. So he pointed out the concept of continentality, first of all, when he traveled to the different part of the Siberia. And he pointed out that along the same latitude, if two places are there, they may experience a different temperature, despite owing to be located on the temperate belt, owing to be distance from the oceans. So the places on the same latitude, if they are located near the ocean, they have moderate climate, and if they are away, if they are far away in the interior part of the continent, they experience the extreme climate. So these were the he made the first isotherm maps. You know, isotherms are the line joining the places of the equal temperature. So first of all, he prepared the isotherm map. So credit goes to him. He gave the word climatology. Then he wrote a monumental work. The name of his book is Cosmos, And this cosmos is the travel account of his journey, because wherever he went, he maintained the travel account. He wrote about the places, the land, and the people of those places, and published in the form of book, that is the Cosmos, which was widely acclaimed by the world. Right. Then there is another scholar of that is, he was a contemporary of the Humboldt, known as Carl Ritter. So Carl Ritter was a human geographer, and he was teleologist. His approach of explaining the geographical phenomena was in terms of the religion, and he pointed out that God's plan is revealed in the harmonious relations between man and nature. If you look on the nature, the hello. Then he gave the concept of unity and diversity. So his contribution is also very wide and extensive. So these were the scholars, and these were the contributions. So I think the time is over. Hello?
No, sir. No, sir. Please complete. Abhishek Dubey, please switch off your mic.
Okay.
Abhishek Dubey, please switch off your mic.
So, can you give a few minutes for completing this lecture? Hello?
Sir, we have time, sir.
Okay. So he developed let us finish. Okay. Now,
sir, we have time, sir. We can continue these three slides because we have time till 8:30. So there is no need to worry.
Okay. Come. So he gave an approach known as teleological approach, and as I pointed out that the teleological approach was the religious approach. He tried to explain any phenomena on the surface of Earth or in the sky, especially the phenomena of the celestial sphere, in terms of the God's plan. He pointed out that all the planets, the sun, the star, some superpower, they have created it, and they have created in a well-planned way. And that is why all the planets, they are moving along their orbit. They are not colliding with anyone. Their speed is a fix. And that sun shines in the east and set in the west. So if we see the God's plan in making the earth and its various features, he tried to explain it in terms of religious explanations, that he was the supporter of teleological approach. Okay, his approach was not very much scientific. The approach of the scientific approach was of his contemporary, that was the Humboldt. Then he gave another concept in the geography. He developed the concept of unity and diversity. What is this concept? That if it is a surface of Earth, if you look on the surface of Earth, you know that the Earth is has diversity in terms of climatic condition, in terms of topography, in terms of soil, in terms of minerals, in terms of natural vegetations. But despite all these attributes of nature, all these surface features, they are interrelated. They are influencing each other. For example, suppose if we take the landforms. So landform has a bearing on the soil. If you compare the land, if you compare the soil of the hilly areas to that of the plain area, we find that in the plain area, we come across alluvial soil, on the hilly area, laterite soil, which is less fertile. So why it is so? Because in the hilly area, there is a problem of soil erosion, accelerated rate of the soil erosion. So because of that, the soil of that area is being influenced, and because of that it becomes laterite. The nutrients of that soil leached away and come to the lower slope. As a result, it becomes the less fertile. But the leached away nutrients from the soil that is deposited in the low-lying areas, which give rise to the formations of the alluvial soil. So in this way, there's a relationship between the landform, that is the plain, plateaus, and the mountain, and the type of the soil. Similarly, there's a relationship between the vegetations and the landforms or different altitude of a mountains. If we move from the lower latitude to the higher latitude, we find that there are different belts of different type of forests. For example, on the foothill of the mountains, we come across the deciduous forest, especially the moist deciduous forest, the sal, teak, shisham, sagwan. These trees are there. If you go a bit higher, we come across the temperate forest. Then above that becomes coniferous forest, which are of conical shape, and it is a very canopy or foliage is not very wide and large. So different type of vegetations, they are also influenced by the temperature and the altitude. So what he tried to explain that though diversities are there on the surface of Earth in terms of topography, in terms of climatic conditions, in terms of soil, in terms of other attributes, but they are interrelated, they are affecting each other. So this is the concept of unity in diversity, how despite being different, they are interrelated, and how they are affecting each other. So this is the unity in diversity. Then the Ritter was founder of the comparative methods in regional geography. He was a supporter of the regional approach of the geography, but he pointed out that there must be a comparative study of different regions. Okay, suppose if we are studying the Chota Nagpur regions, there must be some comparative study of the Karnataka plateau. Both are the plateaus, but in order to see that what variations are there of the different geographical feature. Similarly, if we are a study about the Ganga plain, there must be similar study to the coastal plain, or we have a comparison between the plateau to that of the plain. So this type of comparative study should be there in order to know the variations, because one of the definitions of geography is this, that geography is the study of spatial variations. If all the phenomena on the Earth's surface would have been the same, there was no need of the geographical study. Since variation is there, so there is geography. So according to him, he tried to convince that in regional study there should be comparative study also. Our study should not be confined to a specific region. Rather, we should make a comparative study of the geographical conditions of different region in order to know the variations, and then we try to explain it, that if variation is there, what is the region. So this is the real approach of the geography, as according to the definitions of modern definitions of the geography, because traditional definitions of geography is that geography is the gazetteers of the informations, like the length of the river and the height of the mountain peaks, and the type of the soil, and the capitals of the country, and the ports. So this is geography, but geography is not only confined to this. Geography has a broader horizon, and we can study any attributes of the Earth's surface, whether it is a physical, social, cultural, religious, linguistic. There is a linguistic geography, there is another branch of linguistic geography, that how different type of languages they have developed in different regions, and what are the geographical conditions which promoted the development of those languages. So different branches of geography is there. So he tried to explain that concept. Ritter's methods said to be deductive. You might have studied that there are two approaches in the of the research. One is inductive and another is deductive. If we undertake any research, we have two approaches. One is inductive. So as far as the approach of the Humboldt was concerned, he believed in the inductive approach. What is inductive approach? That when we start from a particular and go to the general, when we make the study of a particular area, its geographical attributes, or its linguistic characteristics of a particular area, and then we try to make generalization on the basis of the local studies. Then we move to the generalizations. Okay, that approach is inductive, which is based on empiricism. We select different areas, collect data, and analyze that data, and after the analysis of the data, and we reach to certain conclusions. So that is inductive approach, which was the approach of the earlier scholar, that was Humboldt, who was the contemporary of the Karl Ritter. But as far as the approach of Karl Ritter was concerned, he believed in the deductive approach of the research. What is deductive approach? That we move from the preconceived assumptions, theories, and laws, and then we, on the basis of those laws, assumptions, and theories, we try to see that whether any phenomena are in accordance to that laws or theories or not. If it is in according to that theories, it is okay, and if it is not, then we try to explain it. Then he was first scholar who discovered or who explained a very important phenomenon, the differential heating and cooling of the land and water. You know that on this phenomena, the classical theory of the origin of monsoon is concerned, because we teach in the origin of the monsoon that the nature of the heating and cooling of the land and water is different. And land is heated up more rapid as compared to the water bodies. Why? Because of difference in the specific heat of the land and water. So during summer seasons, what happens that there is excessive heating of the mainland of the India, and low pressure develops over India, and at the same time there is high pressure. So winds begins to blow from the areas of high pressure to the low pressure, and since these winds are coming from the ocean, they are moisture laden, and after striking with the mountain barriers, they cause rainfall. So the origin of monsoon, you can say, is based on this concept, and this concept was given by the Ritter first of all, which is still persistent or acceptable. Then the monumental work of Karl Ritter was Erdkunde. The name of his book was Erdkunde, which conceptualized regional geography as contrasted with the systematic geography of Humboldt. So the name of the book of Humboldt is the Cosmos, and this Erdkunde was written by the Karl Ritter, and actually this will the regional geography. What is regional geography? I have already discussed what is the difference between systematic geography and the regional geography. So regional geography is the regional descriptions of the feature of our surface, not only that surface, but human aspects also, like distribution of race, distribution of population, languages, caste, religion, different aspects we study over different regions of the world, their distribution, their characteristics, and then we try to explain it. So he conceptualized the regional aspect of the geography. So these scholars, especially the Immanuel Kant, Verenius, von Humboldt, and the Karl Ritter, they were the eminent scholar who contributed a lot in the field of geography, especially the Humboldt contributed to the field of physical geography, and then Ritter to the field of human geography and the regional geography, Immanuel Kant in the field of astronomy, and this celestial bodies and the physical geography. And Venenius played a vital role in developing dichotomy or dualism in the geography. He attempted to do the branching of the geography into different papers, you can say, or different sub branches of the geography, like systematic, regional, human, physical. So these were the contribution. And as far as this aspect is concerned, it's a very wide and extensive aspect. So I think this much is enough. Hello.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So
Yes, sir.
If now, if any doubts are there, we can discuss.
Yes, sir. There are not many questions. In fact, the whole lecture was so comprehensive and so detailed that a lot of things are automatically got cleared. But still, we have 4 questions. One is by Alia Naz. I think that in the last part of your lecture, you have already cleared that question, but still I'm reading that question. Who influenced the geographical discoveries or the geographical developments the most during the Renaissance? How did that person, who influenced the geographical discoveries or geographical developments the most during the Renaissance? How did that person then impact and paved the way for other geographers?
You know that. Hello.
Yes,
Hello.
sir.
I pointed out that most of the explorers and the discoverers, they were very much motivated by the Ptolemy's book, that is geography. When they went through that book, they found the descriptions of the different part of the known and unknown world. So a sort of interest developed. And after that, Europeans, certain rulers were there. For example, the Henry, Prince Henry, the navigator, he supported a lot for setting out the voyages and explorations. Then the king of the Spain, the queen of the Spain, that is the Isabella I and the Elizabeth, they provided financial supports for setting out the discoveries to the different part of the world. So we can say that the discovery and exploration was partly motivated by the financial support of the trading companies and the rulers of that period, and partly by going through the classical text of the Ptolemy.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, sir. There is another question by Arzu Naz. She's asking that how did geographical reasons led to the start of Renaissance in Italy, and why most of the explorers were from Portugal?
Why most of the
explorers belong to Portugal?
Portugal.
That's a very different kind of question, but the first part of question is very vital. How did geographical reasons led to the start of Renaissance in Italy?
You know that that area, Italy, the Renaissance started from the Italy, the city of Florence, okay? And at that time, what happens that after the Dark Age, that the Italy was divided into various states, okay? And the Greek and Roman, these were the states. So there were the ideal conditions for academic advancement. That at that time the Ptolemy's book, that was one copy of the translation of that book was received by these Greek and Roman scholars. So because of that.
Yes, sir. Another question is from Kumar Yashwant. He's basically asking for your observation. He's saying that it was very insightful lecture. I would like to know that, like Renaissance, which taught us about unity of diversity, whether we are developing geographically in modern days or we are moving backwards.
We are developing geography in modern days.
He is saying that like Renaissance, which taught us about unity of diversity, unity in diversity, whether we are developing geographically in modern days or we are moving backwards.
No, no, we are not moving backwards. We are moving forward because you know that some latest developments are also taking in the new branches of the geography. For example, one of the branch that is the remote sensing and the GIS, and you know that with the help of these tools and techniques, a lot of new informations is being gathered, and we are also trying to verify the old the informations which were developed during Renaissance periods. And also beside this, some other branches are emerging out, so we cannot say that we are moving backward, rather we are moving forward, and development is taking place in this field.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. There is just one question by Ankita, and she's asking that can we say that Spain and Portugal were the two most important pioneers for the geographical discoveries during Renaissance?
Of course, because most of the discoveries and explorations that started either from the Spain or the Portugals, you know, and the rulers of those countries, they supported these activities for economic reasons, maybe for the economic reasons, but also you know that some Renaissance spirits was also there. That was the spirit of adventure was there.
Yes, sir. I'm taking up the last question for the session, and that is from Jagrati. She has asked that what hazardous impact did the ecosystem face with the invention of new geographical devices during the Renaissance? What hazardous impact did the ecosystem face with the invention of new geographical devices during the Renaissance?
I think there is no any geographical hazards, because all the tools and implements which were there and which we are taken help of exploring activities, you know, some large scale machines were not there because industrial revolutions came after that. Okay, so we cannot say that they were hazardous.
Right. Actually, Jagrati, the geographical instruments are not to play any kind of hazardous role for the environment. The geographical instruments are basically a kind of a tool to help a lot of things related to geography, whether it is the physical aspect of geography or even the environmental aspect of geography. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you for this. I just feel like I was once again in your class. I was there. I was there in 1988 till 1982. 4 years.
Now I am old. I'm nearing 60, and I don't have that energy which you have. You might have seen at that time.
Yes, but, and even we relished the way you taught us in class 11th as well as in BA first year geography also. And we used to feel very frightened of you also in your practical classes. So उसमें बड़ा डर लगता था. Theory classes में बड़ा मजा आता था. So thank you very much, sir. It was just like feeling like that. I hope Rajshri is there, and Rajshri was asking. There was a lecture by Asim Bhai a few days ago, and Rajshri has asked a question related to the roots. So I hope Rajshri, if you are here, you must have got some of the responses today. जो question तुमने उस दिन पूछा था, उसका आज तुम्हें कुछ response मिला होगा. In fact, Rajshri, even myself as a student of geography, I think that the land route, which we call the Silk Route, was dominated by the Asians.
Mongols. That was dominated by Mongols.
Yes, that was dominated by the Mongols and later on by the Turks when Islam and the Muslims came into power in the Central Asia region. And that is why the Europeans compelled to find the sea routes. They were compelled to find sea routes because that Silk Route was led by Mongols and then by the Turks, right? So another thing I see that is that Asians dominated till the time they were dominating through the land. The Europeans dominated when they went for the discovery of the sea routes, and certainly the opening of the air routes established their supremacy over the world. So this is how I also see Rajshri. Sir, बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया आपका मेरी तरफ से. As your shagird, I am your shagird forever.
नहीं नहीं, I'm feeling proud of having a student like you. And when a student progress and go to a higher post, it is a real pleasure for the teacher, because teacher feel elevated.
Thank you, sir.
If he is a student go to a place, a higher place, it is a pleasant moment for the teacher. It is the achievement of the teacher.
बस सर, आप लोगों की मेहनत पर मोहब्बत है सर. So I now request our younger colleague Saket to pose the vote of thanks. Saket, please.
Thank you, sir. On behalf of Department of English, Karim City College, I would like to thank you for the very enlightening session, sir. The session was very fruitful and informative for the participants. You got to learn so much connecting Renaissance to the geography. So thank you so much, sir. I would also like to thank all the faculty members and the participants for being here with us, and we'll hopefully meet again, sir.
I would like
any other lecture virtually and also in our college, sir.
I would like to seek your feedback. It was not a purely geographical lecture, because the gentries of most of the students are of the language. Okay.
Yes.
So some of the geography.
The feedback from the side of participant is very encouraging, sir. They are there in the chat box. So they are all high words of praise and a lot of appreciation. And
because it is very easy to teach the student of geography, but if the composition, the student is diverse, so it is very difficult for the teacher.
No,
okay.
They have good words of appreciation in the chat box, sir.
So
Saket,
I would
please
like
go.
to add something to it.
Yeah, Rashmi, please.
So we being literature students, we often get a lot of details about the language and the literature part, and even arts is that matter. But it's very rare to have a session on the geographical aspects of Renaissance, and it was a very insightful lecture. You also answered a couple of doubts that I had from previous session, as Sir mentioned before. And I really appreciate you taking all this time, pain, and effort to do this. Please continue doing whatever you are. It was one of the best lectures I've ever attended. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you very much for patience listening. I'm very thankful to Dr. Yahya for giving me an opportunity to express my views on this particular topic. So I'm very thankful to him.
It was very pleasurable to have you here with us, sir. It was very informative session.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir.
बहुत शुक्रिया सर. Thank you so much, sir. ख्याल रखिएगा अपना, सर. Thank you.
Shubh Din. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.